I'm going to add another article, and when I hit submit, we need to fix a couple of problems. So one of them is we see when we create a new post, some extra spacing gets added here. And then secondly, the content for the title and slug is rendered, but the content for the publish date is not rendered, which is because the format from the database is not compatible for the format that this date field expects. So I'll start by fixing this, and then we'll fix this one as well. So let's sort out the publish date. I'll add another getter called publish date as input value, and then in here we'll create a variable to retrieve the publish day, and then we'll retrieve the publish month, and from here we're going to return the correct format. So with the correct format, we need to specify the year followed by a hyphen, followed by the month, of course it's publish month, followed by a hyphen, and then followed by our publish day. Let's just see what that looks like when we test this out. So I'll copy this, and then I'll come to our article form, and then in place of our publish date, I'll paste that here. Okay, so I'll save that, and let's add a new article. I submit that. The publish date still not showing up, which is because, let's try and log this out and see what that looks like. So if I save this, I'll add another one. So you can see it returns as in this format. We need to prepend a 0 if the number is below 10, because it's not the right format for this date field. So I'll come back here, get rid of that, and then in our article model, we need to check if the day is below 10, we'll prefix a 0 followed by the publish date day, or else we'll just return the publish date day. Even in fact, I'll just do this instead, and can do that, and then I'll create a variable for month. Okay, so if month is less than 10, then we do the same stuff here. Let's try adding a new post, and there we go. Okay, so secondly, we need to fix this text area field and this extra spacing that's been added. So the extra spacing being added is caused by our GL templating engine. So if we view the page source, you can see that it formats the HTML output, and as a result, the text area gets formatting added to it, which adds a new line followed by all this spacing here, which is why we are seeing this spacing here. So the way to solve that is to disable spacing, basically. So we will come to our config.dart, and then we are going to import code buffer library from the code buffer package. So this comes pre-installed with AngelGL, so you don't need to add it to your pubspec YAML file. And in our GL function, once we've passed a reference to our views directory, we find a named argument called createBuffer, which is a function that returns a code buffer object. So we'll do code buffer, and we'll call the no white space. So that should eliminate the formatting that happens. So if we are to test this, in fact, let's just view the page source. So if we view the page source, we see that now it's like that, which guarantees us that the text area doesn't get formatted. So if I add my 7th post, we see that no extra spacing has been added, and I can view the page source to be sure. So if we go to our text area, we find no extra spacing added. Okay, for viewing an article, so when I click this, we should see the article displayed here, because now we've added all of these, but then we can't view them yet. So let's come to our routes, the Dart file, and then we'll define a new route, and this route will be to preview our posts. So we'll call it posts, and then we'll use a placeholder called slug. So the placeholder starts with a colon followed by the name of the placeholder, and here we'll define our request response objects. So firstly, we'll grab a handle to our article service, Secondly, we will retrieve our article from the database. So we need to find one. We use the find one method to find exactly one article. And here to search, we'll create a map object followed by a key name called query. And this will take in a selector builder. So if you've watched my Mongo Dart videos, you know what a selector builder is because we use that pretty much all throughout. We'll import our Mongo Dart package, which means we can use the where selector builder, and what we want is the eq, the equals method, and we want to find where the slug matches the slug from our request, so we can access our URL parameters by doing request params and the name, which we called slug. So from this, create our article object again, and then we will render the article template in which we'll receive our article object. So next we are going to create this article template. So under views, I'll add a new file called article, and like we always do, we'll extend our layout.jl file and define our content block. We'll create a container, we'll create a row, we'll create a column, and in this column we'll have our page heading containing the article title, followed by the article date, and followed by the article's content. So let's test this. If I reload this page, then there we have it. We've got our title followed by the date, followed by our article content. So next what we need to do is to convert this markdown into HTML. So we'll come back, we'll go to our article model, and then similar to this, we'll create a string, which will be a getter, so content as HTML, and this simply returns markdown to HTML. And also just make sure that the markdown package has been imported into this file. So markdown to HTML, and we just need to pass in content. I'll save this, and then if I come back to article, then we just say content as HTML. So let's save this, see what that gives us. So that outputs our HTML, but then it's not actually rendering the HTML to the screen, which is because Angel.jl by default sanitizes our input. It's part of a protective measure against, things like cross-site scripting and so on and so forth. So in order for the HTML to be rendered and not treated as plain text, we need to explicitly tell it to render it as actual HTML. And we do that by simply adding a hyphen after the two opening curly braces. So if I save this and I come back here and I reload, then there we go. We get the actual HTML. Okay. So let's test it out with the other articles. So if I come to second post, it's rendered, fourth post, and so on and so forth. Okay. So at this point, I've taken the liberty of changing the display title for our little blog. So it should say the best tech content instead of repeating my tech blog. Not that important, you don't need to do it. The next item on our list is to add the ability to, well, I was going to say edit, but in fact, before we get there, if we come to our add new article, you'll find that if these fields are left blank, you are still able to submit the form. And this is essentially what happens when we attempt to submit the form. We get an error that throws saying invalid date format, which is because our logic on the backend is at least expecting a valid publish date. Now we can modify that logic to not show that exception, but then an empty document will be added to our MongoDB database, which you don't want because there will be no slug for us to visit that article. So let's add some validation. Come back to the code base. We'll come to our pubspec.yaml file and we'll add a dependency for the Angel validate frame package. So I'll save this and then update my dependencies. You can run pubget in the terminal, that'll do the same thing. So once that's done, we will come to our source directory and I'll create a new file. This file will be called validator.dart. So the way Angel validate works, if I import it, is it gives you what is known as a validator object. So we'll create a variable, we'll call it article validator, and then we get a validator object. So this validator object takes in a map, and this map contains a key of our fields, and then the value would be some sort of validation to attach to those fields. So we've got the title field, for instance, and then for our validator, for instance, we can say we want the title to be a string. So we could say a string, or we could say it's non-empty string, for instance. And the reason why we're able to use this is because that comes with the Angel Validate package. In fact, it's from another package called Matcher or Matches, and Angel Validate exposes that package. If I go to definition, it's one of a set of utility functions to help validate different types of data. So for example, title, we can say it's a non-empty string. For our slug, it's non-empty string. In fact, let's do that for the published date as well. Okay, so once that's done, we'll come to our routes, and then in our routes we'll import our validator, validator.dart, and in here we'll be able to use our article validator. So right about here, let's say we'll create a variable called validation result, and then in here we can do article validator, which has a method called check. So in here we will pass in a map object, which will be our request body as map, and then from this now it will run the validation checks, and then we can in fact console log the results, and then the validation result returns, for instance, an errors list. So let's check this out. I'll add a breakpoint here. I'll save this file first, and let's try this again. In fact, let me restart the whole server. Okay, and then if I go to add new again and let's submit, we get our validation results, and in this validation results we got our errors list populated with 2 items. So in our title, it expected a non-empty string. In a slug, it expected a non-empty string. Back onto my validator, published date is in the wrong format, so it should be snake case. So if I come to the browser and then I send it again, let's put our breakpoint here. I'll restart the server, come to add new, hit submit, and then if we look at our errors list, we see published date, and we see a validation error related to that. Okay, I noticed also for some reason when changes are made to this validator object, we need to restart the whole server, because for some reason hot reloading doesn't pick up changes done in here. Okay, so I'll resume. That's expected. So what we can do here is, if there are validation errors, we can render the same form template but then show the validation error message at the top. So let's do that now. Change this to an if statement, and we'll say if validation.errors is not empty, that means it's got validation errors. We will essentially create an object similar to that. So in order to accommodate for both cases, when there are errors and where there are not errors, I will create a map which will have string for the key name, then the value, let's say, will be dynamic. Okay, and I'll call that template data. So if there are errors, we'll set template data errors to our validation results errors list, or else we'll do the rest of these bits. We'll add our article to the database, and also I'll cut this part, and in here we can say template data dot add all, which will add all the entries of this map. So that means on line 44 here, we'll just pass template data. Okay, so save that. And lastly, I'll actually set the status code of the response to a 400, because there's a bad request due to these errors technically. And in fact, rather than passing the digit 400, I'm going to import the data.io library, and then I'll use the HTTP status, which I believe is an enum, and then we do bad request. Wait, let's see. Oh, I mean abstract class rather. My bad. Okay, so I'll save that. We should be able to test this out. In fact, I'll reload page. Let me restart the server. and then I'll come back to this page, and then I'll hit submit. Then we get it's not empty, which value is to true. Then if we come here, we got our status code that will be set to 400 bad requests. So if I inspect and I go to the network, hopefully that should show up. And if I resume, the same page renders. Alright, sorry, wrong. So if I hit all, yeah, we see a 400 bad request was returned, which correctly describes the issue we're experiencing now because we're sending empty data. So next, let's render out the error messages from the server. So we're gonna come back to our article form template, and then over here, after the alert success, let's add an alert error, and in here we'll have a heading 3 element, and we'll say there was a problem saving changes, and then we'll have an unordered list whereby each list item would be using the for each directive. So for each of, remove the quotes, for each of our errors from our errors key, and then we need to give it an alias for each error, and then we'll call it error, and here using interpolation you can log out that error. Of course, we need to show this message only if our errors list is not null, and then I'll just give this a class. Okay, so let's try this out, and if I try to submit, okay, there we go. Get this error message, there was a problem saving changes, and then these are the default error messages that show up. So let's add a bit of customization to these error messages because Angel Validate allows it. So we'll come to our validator.dart, and as a second argument, the validator object has a named argument called custom error messages, and this also takes in a map. So for the title, we'll say please enter a valid title. So we'll do the same for the slug, and let's do the same for the publish date. And then I'm going to restart the server, and if I come to the browser and I attempt to submit again, there we go. Please enter a valid title, and so on and so forth. Okay, so as well as defining this for each of our validations, because these are pretty much all similar, we can simplify this a lot more by creating one key and separating each of our fields with a comma. So this should also work. If I restart the server and then I come back to the browser and I hit submit, still shows the same error message. We can also be specific with our validation. So for example, with each of our fields, we use the slug as an example. You can add the asterisk symbol, which means that this field is required. You can do that as well. And then rather than passing one of these matches, you can use a custom function, and then this function will give you the slug. So in here you can, for example, check that the slug matches a particular regular expression. So what I'm trying to achieve here is I want the slug to resemble this structure. So for example, I can have a regex check for that. So I'll have a raw string, then in here we'll look at the start of the string, and we want A to Z. You can also have numbers. I'm going to escape the hyphens. You can have hyphens, you can also have underscore. So any character that's either A to Z 0 to 9 contains a hyphen and an underscore. And I use plus to mean we want one or more, and then I'll put a dollar to mark the end of the string. I'll also set case sensitive to false, and then we'll say has match, and then our input will be our slug. So if I save this and I'll also remove this slug from here, save this, and then I restart the server, then I come back to the browser and I hit submit, we still get please enter a valid slug. Also, you can extend, you can add more validators. So this also takes in a list of validators. So I can say, at least for my title, I want a non-empty string, but I also want only alphanumeric characters, for example. So if I save that, restart the server, so hello, and let's submit it. Okay, so it went through the title and slug pass validation, and now we see the validate issue for this field. So I am going to separate this one, publish date, and I'll make that required. For the date, I'll also do a regex match, and in here I'm looking for a digit, which is exactly four digits, followed by a hyphen, followed by 2 digits, followed by a hyphen, and followed by 2 digits again. And then I'll mark that as the end of the string. And let's say has match, and the input will be our date. That means I can use that. And then let's restart the server, add new, and then submit. Empty, set that to hello, hello. Please submit, please enter a valid date. And yeah, I'll leave these two empty. If I hit submit, at least the date goes through, and we see error messages for the title and the slug. Alright, so let me come back, change this to make the title non-empty string. Okay, and let's restart. And if I come back here and I enter, let's say this is the 8th post, then I add some lorem ipsum text, then this should technically go through. Okay, there we go. And then I can click to view the article. And if I come back home, there we have it. This is the 8th post. You would have noticed that if I add an entry and I hit submit and we see validation errors, the content for the title is missing. So we need to inject that value back into the template, even if there was a problem saving changes. So I will come back to our routes.dart, and we're going to use the article key to help us do that. I won't use article serializer, or else it throws on the date. So what I'll do is I'll use the article class directly. So if we come back to this auto generator class, I'm going to use this article class directly. And over here, we'll say template data article will be set to a new article instance. In here, we'll set the content. In fact, let's assign each of these keys to variables. So here, I'm gonna do, and then here, we'll say title, and then title. If title is not empty, then we'll pass in the title, else we pass in null. And let's do the same for the other fields. Okay, so we set our errors, and then we'll set our article key. So let's test this out. I'll go to add new, I'll hit submit. Okay, if we go to our article model, so let's just add a check, and we'll say if publish date is not equal to null, then we'll format it, or else we just return null. And let's do that here as well. And in this case, we'll say if publish date is equal to null, then we'll just return, and we'll return an empty string. Okay, so that should do. So let's test this out again, and if I hit submit, we got this. And if I enter some details, so without the date, and I hit submit, it just says please enter a valid date, and we see that the fields are pre-populated. And of course, if we select the date, and we submit. We get success, and we can view the article. Alright, so I'm going to end this video here because it's going way past 25 minutes on it. If you enjoyed the video, do share with others, do like the video. If you've got any questions, let me know down below. If you are not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button and also hit that bell notification icon next to the subscribe button so that you are updated when the next videos are released. Thank you.